In the tense early years of the Cold War, the US faced a relentless ideological adversary. With the threat of an all-out nuclear war on the rise, researchers began exploring a darker frontier: psychochemical agents, drugs and compounds designed to incapacitate without killing. From the years 1948 to 1975, U.S. Army Chemical Corps' research at Edgewood Arsenal tested over 250 chemicals on around 7,000 military personnel and around 1,000 civilians. Their aim? Evaluate incapacitating agents, protective gear, pharmaceuticals, and most controversially, psychochemical weapons. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. The deeper that we dig into these hidden programs, the darker the truth gets, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Among the many initiatives born at the Edgewood Arsenal, one of the most infamous was what was to become known as Operation Delirium. Officially, it fell under the Army's Medical Research Volunteer Program. On paper, it was presented as a way for enlisted soldiers to contribute in defensive research by volunteering as test subjects. In reality, it placed thousands of young servicemen at the mercy of experimental compounds designed to unhinge the mind. Volunteers were told they were helping their country prepare for a new kind of war. In exchange, they received extra leave, better living conditions, and sometimes promises of career advancement. Most were not told the full scope of what they'd endure. Over the decades, Edgewood researchers tested more than 250 different substances, among them being LSD, BZ, various THC derivatives, and a catalog of other psychoactive agents. The common thread among all of these compounds were their ability to disrupt cognitive functions, erode perception of reality, and render a soldier unable to function in combat. The Army Chemical Corps believed that psychochemical warfare might provide the ideal weapon. Unlike bullets or bombs, a gas or aerosol that induced delirium could neutralize entire units without bloodshed. In theory, it could be seen as more humane than conventional weapons. In practice, the effects were often terrifying. One chemical agent, known as BZ, was especially promising to military scientists. Unlike LSD, which would last around 8 to 12 hours, BZ could incapacitate a person for up to 3 days. The victims of it didn't just hallucinate. They slipped into states of profound confusion, paranoia, and delirium. Some couldn't distinguish between dreams and reality, while others became so disoriented that simple tasks like walking or speaking became practically impossible. One of the most audacious undertakings during this time was later known as Project Dork, conducted at the Dugway Proving Grounds, which is located just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. The goal of Project Dork was to test whether aerosol BZ could incapacitate soldiers at range. Using large smoke generators and chemical munitions, BZ would be dispersed into the air while test subjects moved around through simulated combat exercises. The results of these tests showed that even at distances up to 1,000 yards, exposure could cause rapid disorientation, hallucinations, and breakdown of motor skills. To Army planners, this proved the concept. A non-lethal chemical could silently dismantle an entire enemy unit without a single shot being fired. However, for the soldiers who volunteered, the experience was anything but clinical. Reports describe subjects breaking into hysterical laughter, talking to imaginary companions, or becoming convinced that they were somewhere else entirely. Others would suffer panic, paranoia, or crushing anxiety. Even after the immediate effects wore off, lingering aftershocks often remained. Cognitive fog, depressive episodes, and memory gaps were not uncommon. For many, The voluntary aspect of the program was questionable. Soldiers were often not fully informed of the risks, and in some cases, they were misled about what was happening to them. These tests that were conducted on these soldiers were not just some random drug trials. Each experiment was engineered specifically to measure how well the compound could disrupt command, control, and combat effectiveness. Could an entire platoon be immobilized without actually killing any of them? Could officers be rendered incapable of giving coherent orders? The research sought to answer precise answers, and in many cases, the answer to those questions was yes. But there was also a chilling subtext. If these drugs could dismantle a trained soldier's mind, what might they do to civilians, prisoners, or even political targets? It was a question that haunted the overlap between Edgewood's work and projects like MKUltra. While Operation Delirium unfolded under the U.S. Army's Medical Research Volunteer Program, another project was taking shape in the shadows of the intelligence world. This was MKUltra, a program run by the CIA from the early 1950s into the 1970s. If Operation Edgewood represented the military's fascination with incapacitating an enemy on the battlefield, then MKUltra was the intelligence community's attempt to master the human mind itself. MKUltra was born out of Cold War paranoia. US leaders feared that the Soviets or Chinese had discovered drugs and techniques for brainwashing prisoners of war. American POWs returning from Korea with altered beliefs and confessions seemed to confirm these fears. The CIA wanted a countermeasure, and if possible, an advantage. Thus, MKUltra set out to investigate every conceivable method of manipulating thoughts and behavior. This included the use of many psychoactive drugs, but also the use of hypnosis, sensory deprivation, electroshock, and even exotic experiments with radiation. So here lies the key distinction between MKUltra and Operation Delirium, and that is who the test subjects were. At the Edgewood facility, soldiers volunteered for the Medical Research Volunteer Program, though the full risks were often never explained. MKUltra, by contrast, often targeted civilians without their consent. Hospital patients, psychiatric wards, college students, and even everyday citizens were unwittingly dosed with psychoactive compounds. Despite their different subject pools, there were significant overlaps between the two programs. Both tested LSD extensively. Both documented subjects' altered states with rigorous detail. And both hoped to uncover tools that would decisively tip the balance of the Cold War. For the Army, the goal was field incapacitation. Render a unit full of soldiers confused, delirious, or non-functional. For the CIA, the goal was mind control. Break down an individual's resistance to interrogation, or perhaps create a programmable agent. Both paths reflected the same Cold War obsession, winning not through firepower, but by seizing control of the human mind. But while Operation Delirium's defenders pointed to consent forms and voluntary participation, MKUltra's record was far darker. Many victims had no idea they were test subjects. College students who signed up for psychological studies ended up tripping on LSD. Hospital patients seeking treatment were secretly experimented on. The fallout was severe. Some individuals suffered permanent psychological trauma. A few are even believed to have died as a result of the experiments. Most notably was Frank Olson, a government scientist who plunged from a hotel window after being covertly dosed with LSD by CIA colleagues. The lines between MKUltra and Operation Delirium weren't always clean. Documents reveal CIA interests in the Army's work at Edgewood. Subproponents of MKUltra, such as Project Often, were connected to testing psychoactive substances at the Edgewood facilities. This crossover suggests that while the Army focused on battlefield incapacitation, the CIA saw Edgewood as just another laboratory for psychological warfare. Both programs were eventually shut down, at least officially. In 1975, Senate hearings exposed MKUltra's abuses. leading to a national scandal and tighter restrictions on human experimentation. Edgewood's psychochemical trials would be wound down in the early 1970s. We know that non-lethal weapons research continued into the 1980s and beyond, with direct energy weapons, crowd control chemicals, and psychological operations becoming a part of standard military doctrine. The ghosts of the Edgewood experiments can be seen in research into incapacitating agents, and even modern controversies, like the so-called Havana Syndrome. When Operation Delirium was phased out in the early 1970s, the official story was simple. The results were unreliable, the ethics questionable, and the military decided to move on. But history shows us that these kinds of programs rarely just disappear. They evolve. Reports of the so-called Havana Syndrome, clusters of US diplomats and intelligence officers struck by mysterious neurological weapons abroad, sparked speculations that direct energy weapons or microwave weapons were being used against them. While the government has offered mixed conclusions, the symptoms being vertigo, memory issues, and cognitive impairment are disturbingly reminiscent of the kinds of incapacitation once studied at the Edgewood Arsenal. Is it a coincidence, or the shadow of a program that never fully died? We may never know for certain, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Research born in secrecy often has a way of resurfacing in new forms, long after officials claim it had ended. Long after officials claim it has ended. If you found this exploration into Operation Delirium and its unsettling legacy informative, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We dive into all kinds of hidden histories and declassified secrets, and your support keeps these stories alive.